Welcome to the Gaily Podcast. I'm your host, Robin Dorner.
And I'm your producer, Alex Myers.
This is your weekly podcast series giving you insight into some of the best and brightest Oklahomans. From LGBTQ activists and politicians to business owners and community organizers, there are so many stories to tell. So for our first episode, we had the chance to sit down with Connie Johnson. She has been a force in Oklahoma politics for decades, most notably serving as an Oklahoma state senator and running for governor in 2018. Now she has her own company, Advocacy Works, which focuses on getting more people to vote. So get ready because we're about to learn the ABCs of Oklahoma politics with Connie Johnson.
How have you been holding up during quarantine? Tell us how you've been keeping yourself occupied during all this time.
Interestingly, that's a long story because prior to quarantine, I had been quarantined on my own in memory of my mother who passed right in November of 2018. And a lot of you know that after the governor's race, I literally dropped out of sight to take care of her. Those last 6 months, my advocacy really played a role in her transition because she used cannabis oil instead of opioids, right? But after her death, I committed to take a year off, 35 years of service. And Lord knows the only reason I stopped was my mother, the one who made me possible. So I'm like, I'll honor her for a year. And I was tired. I was emotionally, probably still am. Gosh, my mother. I was born on Mother's Day, and literally I find pictures of us now where I would not be doing this if it had not been for her. My mom is a yellow dog Democrat, born, bred, died, right? Christine Bird spoke at her funeral. So for that year, I took off. I decided to come back, and I did. I re-entered in the cannabis world because that's where I was still engaged and still believe in the policies that need to happen. And I was just amazed at the progress that had happened in the span of that year and a half in that industry. It, to me today, is the one industry in Oklahoma that is doing well in this pandemic moment, right? So, and I made that happen. I was responsible for that. That's an aside. But it's amazing the brilliance, the intelligence, the industrialness, the entrepreneurial stuff that's going on in this field now, and the medicinal stuff that's going on. But the criminal justice reform stuff is not going on. So I entered back in that scene, kind of assessing what's going on. We did the Oklahoma Mardi Gras 2020 at the Capitol, which was an advocacy piece to sign people up. We did almost 200 free medical recommendations that day. But at the same time, acquaint them with the legislative process and let them know that your vote is important. Guarantee your vote by signing up to vote by mail. Go find out who your legislator is. The whole 9 yards for governmental advocacy. It was a success. It was an interesting thing in so many ways, and I won't go into those. But that was Mardi Gras Tuesday. Mm-hmm. After that, everything closed down. So I went back in, and so you asked me how I'm faring. I'm doing just fine because that's what I had been doing for the last 2 years anyway.
So you were ready.
So it didn't strike me as emotionally impactful as maybe it has some people because I was already comfortable with my solitude, my being alone, my time to retool. And so everybody else got forced into that moment, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think a lot of good things have come out of it. Advocacy Works came during this moment, actually operationalizing it, right? I'm still in that process because I'm a government wonk. I don't know the first thing about business. I just know that there is a need for a service for the people that informs them, that guides, that advises, that helps them navigate this process, be it governmental, be it environmental, be it business, be it just any, be it cannabis, right? To help people advocate to elect the right people first and foremost, right? And then to hold those people accountable for making the changes that really affect their lives. So that's what advocacy is all about. Advocacy Works. Yes, Advocacy Works at Gmail is my email address. And that name was waiting on me. I mean, I got the name December 31st, 2019. Oh. And it was there. I was amazed, like, really? So that's my name, and I'm sticking with it.
Yeah.
That to me is just amazing. And I cannot imagine the stress that you went through, going through, running for governor. And on top of that, dealing with your mother. Do you consider Advocacy Works kind of like a tribute to your mother in a way?
Yes, I think this is all. And that's what inspired me, because I was thinking about dropping out, giving up, not wanting to be bothered anymore completely. And it occurred to me that my mother was not a quitter. And boy, she was in the game right up until the end, right? And so I don't get to quit. And then just like we talked about, Alex, we all have a purpose on this land, in this space. God put us here for a purpose. And we'll either realize it or we'll die not realizing it.
Yeah.
Or we'll realize it and we'll live because we know we can't die until we achieve it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I can't imagine you quitting advocacy, Connie.
I know. Yeah. I was tripping.
It's in your blood.
Yeah, it is. It's in my heart. I get upset at the thought that people can't get treated fairly, or because of a lack of education, they don't behave differently. When I can help them, when I can do something to help them, yeah.
Make a difference, right?
Yep.
And I want to speak about some of your recent work. You want to use Juneteenth as another opportunity to increase voter registration. Tell us a little more about that.
Sure. And we want to continue that spirit. So Juneteenth was made great recently. It was made famous or something, right? And he did. Bless his heart. He did. Because I think we know about Juneteenth, but in Oklahoma, we didn't really know that he moved his visit to Oklahoma's Juneteenth holiday. It's celebrated the third Saturday in June. So June the 19th is what Juneteenth stands for. When in 1865, General Granger issued the order letting the slaves know that they were free. The masters already knew that they were free, but they chose to disregard the Emancipation Proclamation because of their profits, right? So Granger came through at the urging of the Black Cavalry that had helped defeat General Lee at, don't get me started naming these historical places, but it marked the end of the Civil War, whatever the great battle was. So they went with General Granger to Texas, headed to Mexico to fight the French. And a storm caused them to run ashore in Galveston, where the soldiers had convinced him to make the announcement so that the people would know. So slaves in Texas found out they were free June 19th, Juneteenth, 1865. Slaves in Oklahoma, which was an Indian territory at the time, and therefore not subject to the Emancipation Proclamation decree, weren't freed until the Indians entered into a treaty with the United States because the Confederacy, they sided with the Confederacy laws, as a condition they entered into the 1866 treaty. Well, there were several treaties, 5 slaveholding tribes that were called civilized. And they signed them at different times in 1866, I believe. The latest one in the month of June was on June 14th, 1866. So that's June 14th is what's relevant in Oklahoma territory, now a state. But the last tribe signed July 19th, 1866. And there's going to be a Juneteenth celebration on 23rd Street on July 19th in Oklahoma City. Yes, that just occurred to me. So that's the celebration. But in 1994, when I was on staff, Senator Maxine Horner and Representative Don Ross introduced legislation making a holiday, an official holiday in the state of Oklahoma, the 3rd Saturday of the month of June. So a lot of education happened in that moment. And in that moment, I also felt that it was important that people understand their power in voting. Like, we were freed as slaves, ultimately to be able to vote, ultimately to exercise that right of freedom. And so many in my community don't vote. There's a Facebook meme going around showing how Trump won by so many in these various states and how many Black people didn't vote, right? So It's a voting block. That is a powerful voting block. It's a powerful voting block in Oklahoma, even with low voting, right? But imagine if more of us voted. So my whole advocacy works push has been, and I've been doing this since 2015 when I was vice chair of the Democratic Party and proposed this program to the party, and it was kind of ignored. And that was a program where we register everybody to vote by mail as a way of guaranteeing their vote. When you sign up to vote by mail, you get the ballot 30 days ahead of time. You can make sure that your voter registration records are in order, right? Sometimes you get to the poll and find out, oh, something's wrong, you've been expunged or something. You don't have to worry about, encountering drama when you go vote. It's COVID safe, right? During this moment. So all of these benefits, in addition to guaranteeing your vote, when you get the ballot, you don't have to use it. You can still go vote in person. But having it early lets you know what's on it, what state questions are on it. Like State Question 802, at the same time we were promoting that, the Medicaid expansion proposal, was one that really directly impacted this community in terms of poor health outcomes. And COVID-19 demonstrated that more than ever. In your face, all of this around June 19th, so that they should get their absentee ballots, vote early, vote yes on 802, and be able to demonstrate through the increased number of absentee ballots in this area that this community voted had a major part in making sure that that question passed. I'm grateful, but it shows that in the hinterlands, in the rural areas, there's such a great need for education. And especially around the issues that most impact them. Their hospitals are closed. They don't have medical providers in a reasonable proximity to them. And all the things about healthcare. But, and literally, they also didn't really vote to support State Question 788, medical cannabis. Again, because of lack of education and awareness. But we know in some rural areas in Oklahoma, opioid addiction is off the charts. And a lot of other politics going on. The environmental pieces that affect them. Just regardless of the issue, this happened to be healthcare and coverage for people who could not afford healthcare. But if it was environmental down in Southeast Oklahoma, if it was opioid addiction in Roland, Oklahoma, and Sallisaw, it's a lack of education that has them voting. And then, you know, I saw where the misleading advertising, boy, those guys are really, really brilliant. You know, making people think that if they vote no on 802, they would be getting rid of Nancy Pelosi and AOC, right? Mm-hmm. And people believe that.
Why do you think the Oklahoma GOP specifically was so adamantly against state question 802?
Yes. So, what is it? The Oklahoma Public Affairs Council, whatever that.
Oklahoma Council on Public Affairs.
Council of Public Affairs is the driver for the Republican Party. And I'm sure Jonathan Small has probably written a white paper on it somewhere that justifies their feelings, right? And I've known Jonathan since he was a kid. He and my son are the same age.
Yeah.
And so it's hard for me to think why. But let's think. Let's put on our Republican hats for a minute. And is there an economic benefit to it for people to be sick disproportionately? So maybe they don't even have doctors to go to out there, but maybe the doctors benefit. And, you know, is there an economic benefit in people dying? So the funeral companies, you know, where's the business aspect of this policy? Where's the business benefit, which is generally what they're looking to ensure, in my opinion?
Yeah.
I don't know. None of those work for me.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But I want to go back to your main issue, which is medical cannabis. For our viewers who don't know, Connie proposed legislation to legalize medical cannabis decades before it even got passed in Oklahoma. Why specifically did you choose medical cannabis for you personally to be at the forefront of it?
So there's another long story. Anyway, so, you know, I was elected in 2005 after 24 years on Senate staff writing about the issues that most affect people. And so in my area where I live, those issues were really front and center a lot of times in major ways. And one of the biggest ones that I studied was this phenomena of grandparents raising grandchildren.
Right.
60% of the kids in Millwood back in the year 2000 were being raised by their grandparents. They had Grandparents' Day, not Parents' Day. Because of the incarceration, a lot of women, with on average 2.3 kids, of their parents was simple possession of marijuana. So, you know, I'm an analyst. I went to the school. I kind of could think about it critically. And I said, well, what can we do about that? Well, let's decriminalize marijuana. I knew that the state wouldn't go for full-blown legalization of adult use, also known as recreational. I knew that was out of the question. So I settled on medical, really, as a way to decriminalize marijuana. And I had no idea they wouldn't go for that either, or I subsequently found out because I introduced it 4 times during my tenure in the legislature. But during the process, you know, again, I'm a student, I'm a scholar of the legislative process. You know, I learned under folks like Ben Brown and Bernice Kane and Cal Hobson. You know all of
good names. Yeah.
Yeah, they were Democrats. I was there when it started to trending conservative. The Democrats were just as conservative as the other guys. And so when I introduced the bill in 2007, the Senate was still majority Democrat. Now, what I did get done that year, and it was a part of my Masters of Rehabilitation Counseling program at Langston University, and that was to introduce legislation relating to over-incarceration of women. And I called for creating a task force to study issues of women in incarceration and reentry and all of that, and fought like heck to get the bill passed. Gosh, that's a long story. Senator Mike Schultz has a role in that. He was former pro tem recently, but got the bill passed. Oh, this was in 2008. There was a tied Senate at that point, 24 Republicans, 24 Democrats. My senator neglected to appoint me chair of task force, and the Republican leader appointed Senator Jonathan Nichols chair.
Huh.
And the committee proceeded to never meet. Right?
Oh, wow.
So the next year, Chris Steele became Speaker of the House. Mind you, for 2 years, I had been beating the bush, House side, Senate side, Republican, educating people about the plight of women returning from prison. And you know, during that time, I ultimately hired a lady who had been in prison, Gwen Fields, and she's now in law school. Right? But she was a poster child for what happens with these women as they try to reenter society, as they try to regain a relationship with their children, as they are potentially traumatized by a memory of while they were incarcerated, of what happened to their child in foster care, in state custody. So much going on for these women. So I posited that they needed supported employment. They needed supported housing, counseling, supported transportation. And that's what I advocated. Chris Steele heard me. Mm-hmm. When he was speaker, he got approved the legislation that created the reentry and diversion program for women. We went on to introduce several criminal justice reform proposals. And mind you, I'm introducing cannabis the whole time. Mm-hmm. But so many of these proposals have either become law or they're under discussion right now, right? Yeah. Because it was unsustainable. What we were doing in incarceration was unsustainable. But a lot of the proposals, like getting the governor out of the parole process, decriminalizing simple possession of any drug from a felony to a misdemeanor, medical cannabis, legalizing medical, all those things got done via the initiative petition process.
My next question would be, we've talked about a lot of issues today and your work in the Oklahoma legislature. Would you ever consider giving it another shot in 2022?
Well, that's a loaded question. Yes.
Yes. Okay. You just want to leave it at yes?
Like I just said, there's more to be done and I can help. Mm-hmm. And I think I have a pretty unique experience, background, knowledge base.
Yeah.
Certainly about cannabis. Certainly about where we were trying to go. And to the extent that that hasn't happened yet, my work is not done.
Yeah.
You know, till Oklahoma starts to deal like Illinois and California with the inequities that this commodity has brought to various communities. Until we do that, then we've not done right by the people who've been hurt the most.
It's more than just,
and that's legalizing. That's just not my community. That is every community in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
You know, to the extent that we lock up more people than any other place in the world. So yeah, until the people are free and free indeed, until they are voting and recognizing their power, there's still work to be done. And the reason I did it in the first place is to be able to push the button. So I would like to be able to sign the bill now.
Yes. I want to just learn more about you as a person, because you got a full ride to UPenn to study French. And I also majored in French as well. And I wanted to ask you the question that everyone asks me when I tell my major in French. Why?
I love that language. I loved it from the time I was in a sophomore in high school. My mother, we come from Louisiana, our people. And so there's a French influence down there. But the real story is I knew I could graduate with French. And it came time to get out of college, and I was like, okay. So then my plan was to teach. So I did pursue education, a master's in education. I didn't finish it, but I did my student teaching at inner city high school in Philadelphia. And it showed me that there was bigger issues that I could perhaps weigh in at another level, because we ran out of paper in like September. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, that's not gonna work for me. So I came back to Oklahoma and started working in the community action agency. But Alex, a fun story is that when I was in my French class sophomore year, I came up with my daughter's name. And I wanted every vowel that I could in Anastasia. So I created her name. It's got 14 letters. And when she was born in 1988, I just couldn't come up with another name. So her name is Anastasia, Annastathayzsia. It's got 14 letters. It fits the alphabet song. She's a very bright young lady. She's a graphic designer. But that's my story about French at Penn. But I loved it. I literally wish I had studied abroad. I wish I could have done that. But I was also a cheerleader at the time. So, I had my priorities mixed up. But I loved Philadelphia. It was an opportunity to get a first-class education, kind of like on the east side in Oklahoma City, because Penn sat in the heart of West Philadelphia. And, I could go across the street and eat at Father Divine's for like 25 cents, as long as I put on a skirt and had my arms covered. So, I worked in political campaigns there. I worked on the 18-year-old constitutional amendment for voting for 18-year-olds. So I really did, cut my teeth in an environment that was politically charged at the time. Rizzo was the mayor. You had the stuff going on in the 70s and the Vietnam and the political unrest, the Kent states. And, it was a revolutionary time. But that, it formed my developmental, that was my developmental period that informed my passion now. And so I left Philly in 1975, came back to Oklahoma City, started working community action agency, ultimately worked as a public information and training officer for them. And then with the CEDAR program, the Comprehensive Employment and Training Act, where, we worked employing people through training programs and putting them to work. And I think it's going to be that kind of proposal that's going to be essential coming out of COVID, because a lot of the jobs are no longer there. Even the way jobs are done has changed. And, how we train people for jobs. What are we going to do with the people who are unemployed now at low-level jobs that no longer exist, right? So I'm looking forward to weighing in on recovery from a matter of point of view of policies that are going to come in useful to help Oklahoma.
And I guess lastly, the last question that I'm leaving with all our guests on this podcast is, are you proud to be an Oklahoman? And if so, why?
I love Oklahoma. I was born in Holdenville while my parents lived in Dustin and Holdenville was the closest hospital. So I'm straight out of the Southeast from Dustin, which was an all-white town, and we were part of an experiment to put a Black family in an all-white town. My dad was a teacher. But we moved to Idabel from there. So from the time I was 3 to 6, I grew up in Idabel, and I loved it. They drugged me kicking and screaming from Idabel. Idabel has a Black mayor today. But you also don't want to get off in the woods in McCurtain County because you might get killed because of how well cannabis grows there. But that's just another story. But we moved to Oklahoma City when I was 6. And this is, the story just really intertwines with the reality of this social era we were in, because we moved on 22nd Street. The color line was 23rd Street.
Mm-hmm.
And my next door neighbor was an elderly white couple who were unable to take flight to Edmond and Moore and wherever those people went, right? So I used to go next door, and my mom kind of ended up being Mr. Ballew's caregiver. But he had these books, and I got to read and read and read. I was a nerd, but I read about Darwin's theories of natural selection, and I read about 1984, and all of the predictive stuff that we're in right now, which kind of inspired me to sponsor the Real ID bill in Oklahoma. And regardless of how you feel about it, I didn't feel that our personal identifying information, our biological information, should be deposited in a data bank anywhere for the Chinese to corrupt, right? And so, yeah, we're going to comply with that. But for those who are watching and who agree with that, your passport will serve as ID just like a driver license. So you do not have to get a real ID. You literally can just get a regular driver license and still use your passport to get on a plane or enter a federal building. But anyway, that inspired my paranoia. Went to Douglas High School, went to Creston Hills, Kennedy. John F. Kennedy was murdered when I was in the 6th grade. They built Kennedy Junior High School to honor him the next year. We were the first 7th graders to go there. Then I went to the almighty Douglas High School, Frederick A. Douglas High School, the oldest public high school in the state of Oklahoma, the oldest, along with Mount St. Mary's, which is the oldest private school. But there we were taught by people who had masters and PhDs because they couldn't get jobs because of the race issue teaching anywhere else. So I had a first-class high school education, did well academically, earned a full scholarship to the University of Pennsylvania, came back home still. I never felt I was leaving Oklahoma forever. People say, well, you can't. Well, yeah, I came back home, and I lived in Tulsa for a minute. But I like Oklahoma. With the Community Action Agency, I traveled the state. And so I've been to all 4 corners of this state. It's a pioneering state. That's what I like about it. We're spunky. We are determined. We are, if you'll either find a way or you'll make one in Oklahoma. And
exactly.
It's that spirit. It's that spirit that speaks to my heart. It's straight up. That's all I know. So yes, I love Oklahoma. I think we can be a shining star. I love red too, but it doesn't have to be a negative red. It can be a powerful, energetic, inspirational beacon of light for the world to see. Like I said, everybody is wanting to come to Oklahoma in the cannabis space.
Yeah.
It's major. Again, it is the one industry that continues to thrive in this state right now when everything else is having problems.
Yep.
So yes, this is my state. I want to be here. I like it here, and I need to be here.
That's beautiful. And honestly, as someone who just recently moved back, that gives me hope to see people like you, progressives like you, living in Oklahoma, saying, I am proud to be Oklahoman. and really just wear their heart out on their sleeves and say, I'm still going to advocate for what I believe in, despite people that might not agree with me. So all I can say.
And we needed you
Mm-hmm.
to have gone away, experienced something, and bring back the best to your home.
Yeah.
And that's what I think we have with you, with folks who had a career and came back here to come home, with us who stayed here and fought against regressive measures. Together, we can change this state. It's not like people think. It's not like the media would have you believe. So
yeah,
I'm
we're not
so
a flyover
grateful.
state.
What we can do with the colleges and universities, those students, to inspire them. You know, we shouldn't have a brain drain here. We ought to be able to entice our people to stay.
Mm-hmm.
So let's create a space where it's welcoming and it's inclusive and it's appreciative and of everybody, and regardless of our differences. That's the best way for us to all do well.
Exactly. Well, Connie, thank you so much. It has been such a pleasure talking to you. I cannot wait to see what you do in the future with Advocacy Works. I can't say how excited I am. So.
Well, let me say this, because you know I'm always working.
Mm-hmm.
We want to do that template on Indigenous Peoples Day. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
We want to do the guaranteed voting strategy program, voter awareness program for June for Indigenous Peoples Day, which is October the something.
Mm-hmm.
And do the same energy around inspiring Indians and their tribes to engage, because perhaps their turnout is even lower than ours. And even in their tribal elections, there's no participation. So again, I look forward to us continuing to work to ensure that all groups, it could be LGBTQ, it could be the cannabis community, the Black community, that everybody is aware of and taking advantage of guaranteeing their vote.
Mm-hmm.
So
and
I look forward to working together on that.
And before I let you go, if people want to get to learn more about you or follow you on social media, where can we reach you at?
Sure. I have a Facebook page for Advocacy Works.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got like a check in a red, black and white check in the box. And my email address is yesadvocacyworks@gmail.com.
Great. We'll put that in the video description so people can contact you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate you. Bye, Robin. I love you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
God, I just love Connie Johnson. She really is a rarity in Oklahoma. If you want to learn more about her, we'll be linking her socials in the description. But now I want to ask you some questions. Do you think voting is enough to enact change in your community? If not, then what else can you do on top of that? Also, what did you think about Connie's life's work in criminal justice reform and medical marijuana? If you're from Oklahoma, have the issues she talked about personally affected you? We'd be thrilled to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. And with that being said, we've reached the end of the episode. Wah, wah. If you liked it, give us a thumbs up on YouTube or share this podcast on social media and tag @TheGailey. Once again, I'm Robin.
And I'm Alex.
And you just listened to the Gailey Podcast.